It's not so easy to describe the work of Alan Publlex because he's working with several media, including photography, since the very beginning of the 90s. For this exhibition, he decided to mix photograph and computer drawing. He redrawn directly on the photograph what is already on the photograph, but he redrawn it by computer, and so that makes a very slight side of the reality, and you discover something slightly different. It's a reality, but it's not totally the reality, like in the hyper-realistic paintings of Richard Estes, for example, which are really a reference for that work, for example. For this work, named Landscape 202, Alpine, Texas. He's not mixing two different images, but he's mixing two different techniques to remake the same image, the same landscape. In Alan Publlex work, there is always this trick about reality. The title of the show is Background, so it's about the landscape in general, but it's also about the mental landscape of the artist. And for him, he has a theory, which is Europe has been building his history on monuments like churches, like antiques ruins, like really architecture. As America is much younger, the Americans built their history more through landscape than through monuments. For example, everybody knows Monument Valley or the mountains or the Nevada desert, and they are part of the history because they are part of the West Conquest, they are part of a lot of things in the French, at least, imagination. The idea is that the photograph, of course, is not a trompe-l'œil. He doesn't want to be hyper-realistic, but he wants to be realistic enough so you can get tricked in the image.
So many happened on the Studio 54 in the beginning on the 80s or the end 70s. So I think it's a very cool wall from Todd Papageorge, 78 to the 82. This was a wild period also in the art scene in New York. There was a lot of big advertising companies really in New York. So all the creative people was living at that time maybe in New York. And you see Andy Warhol factory was very close. He was always there. That was a meeting point to make business, party in that time. All the Broadway people have free entrance, come in. That was the reason why so many parties and also naked people was there. It was very difficult to come in the club, Studio 54. You need someone. He was together with a beautiful girl. She was paparazzi, and she know all the people, the doorman, and that was the reason Todd came in the Studio 54. And that time, like Grace Jones, Liza Minnelli, Andy Warhol, Basquiat was going in the club. For him was not important to have these famous people on the photographs. He's not a paparazzi. He was growing up in New York, going around with Gary Winogrand and Joel Meyerowitz. He's quite well known about street photography in the 70s. A very famous book, Central Park book from Todd Papageorge. And he was a teacher since last year at the Yale University in photography. He put a big camera, like 6x9-inch format camera. Means he cannot make a snapshot. For him, it was important to have this whole frame as a picture, like a painting. The flashlight was a big one, so it was very like to go in the gym, to move this big camera with the flashlight in the right moment. So to have this people like not posing. So this makes the picture so interesting. And you see the whole frame, also small things are important in the picture. So this is really like an artist. The difference is here, the sensitivity, how he's doing the picture, and you have all the feeling about the time and it's a good documentation now. It's many qualities in the picture. Also the printing, all is analog. It's a handmade print, it's silver print, it's all the different, you see the quality, it's also the printing. So I think this project, what he was done in the 70s, will help him so much to be a famous artist.
Pierre and Jil are a French duo. They met in the 70s and they're quite famous in France. Pierre is a photographer, Gilles is a painter. They build together very elaborate stage design and then they invite either their friends or celebrities to come and pose for them. The result are those portraits, which are first printed on canvas by Pierre, and then Gilles repaints the entire surface. The effect is quite stunning because you don't really know if it's a photography, if it's a painting. They also make their own frames, which are often very complex with beads, with glass, with fake diamonds. So their work is quite complex and really plays on our stereotypes. Is this popular art? Is this kitsch? Is this high art? Is this a portrait of a famous person? Is this an anonymous person? It's also always a bit tongue-in-cheek. They play on the questions of identity, gender, belonging, the belonging of identity, sexuality. They're one of the most iconic gay couples in the art world. And they're also quite famous for having portrayed many people who then became stars. This work, which has created a bit of a buzz at the FIAC for the last 2 days, was commissioned by the Manufacture des Gobelins, which is a very well-respected institution here in Paris, known for commissioning tapestries. And they wanted Pierre and Gilles to come and make an installation around the furniture of Marie Antoinette. And they made this installation with furniture at the museum. And in the middle of the installation, they made a portrait of Marie Antoinette as they see her. And to play the part, they asked Zaya, a 20-year-old French celebrity, to pose. And Zaya is a quite controversial figure. She was known for a scandal a few years ago. When she was a minor, she had an affair with a very famous soccer player. And there was a huge scandal about that. And she since then launched her own line of lingerie. She's one of those figures of the media world who's famous for her beauty, for her charisma, known to be known. Pierre and Gilles thought it was very interesting to choose her to portray Marie Antoinette because Marie Antoinette, when she was alive, was also a very controversial figure. Although she was the queen, she was very badly attacked in the press before the French Revolution for her sexuality, for being foreign. Zaya is of North African descent. Lots of connection between the two women, maybe. When Pierre and Gilles started to make their works, that was a great innovation. No one had ever made works with such stage design. We know David LaChapelle quite well, who says that when he first saw their work, he was blown away. For many people in the 80s, it was amazingly refreshing to see something that was beyond photography, that was also painting with very pop colors, and that had no prejudices about what art should be, and that was really questioning what beauty should be. What is beauty? Is this the model? Is this the colors? Is this a subject? It was very daring at the time, very controversial to dare to go away from minimalism or abstraction in such a radical way.
James Welling is really an artist who's pushed the boundaries of photography and the photographic medium, experimenting with new processes and really going back and forth between not only abstraction and figuration, but darkroom processes, camera-less photography, and then more traditional photographs. He's been active since the late 70s. He went to Cal Arts. He actually didn't study photography. He taught himself photography on his own after he graduated from art school. We're showing a brand new series, so it's his most recent body of work. It is a revisiting of a previous series called Flowers. And what you're seeing here is a hybrid process, partly photograms, so partly a very traditional analog process. He actually took flower blossoms from his garden and laid them on negative paper and created a photogram in that way. And then he processed that with color filters. That was how the color was originally introduced and how these images were made, but he then scanned them and layered multiple images together and modified the color digitally. So it's really a process that's encompassing both the traditional and analog processes and new digital technology. Well, he's very interested in painting, and he's a great colorist, and I think that really comes through in these works. The original flower series had a more muted palette and more watercolor-like. This is more electric and more saturated. Of course, when you talk about photograms, you think Man Ray, but Jim has used the photogram process in many, many different ways throughout his career, so this is just one facet of that.